I just think you could have shot it with a different lens, not gotten so close to her face, maybe given her better fitting dress. There were just problems there. When her skirt started to flap, I was like, no, stop it.
I felt that way when she's like, "Ooh, I warmed my body for you, Shadow." When Laura's like, come over here and give me a smooch. No, thank you, zombie wife. Welcome back to Shout on TV American Gods Edition, the unofficial podcast companion piece to the hit Starz show American Gods. I'm one of your hosts, Roger Roper, and alongside me are my two co-hosts, Big D, Dick Ebert.
Good evening.
And Gene Lyons.
We're in a weird, tense place racially in America. I don't want to add to that climate of hatred.
And this is our deep dive episode where we look back at this week's episode of American Gods and share our insights, research, and opinions. This week's episode was entitled Lemon Scented You. Shadow Moon's emotional reunion with his dead and unfaithful wife Laura are interrupted when he and Mr. Wednesday are kidnapped by the new gods, Media and Technical Boy, and offered a deal to come join them by their apparent leader, Mr. Worlds. This was episode 5 of the 8-episode season. Guys, what did you think?
I am stubborn, and you guys know that. And after episode 4, I was disgusted with it, and a lot of people took my liking of episode 5 as a signal that I was wrong. I think it's actually further evidence that we could have done without episode 4. We could have rolled straight into this. Everything I didn't like about 4 was righted in 5. Laura's character and the way it clicked with shadows was really wonderful. I think that things felt real to me. The action and pacing were great. What did you guys think?
I totally agree. I came back and enjoyed Laura. Now, in episode 4, she came across to me as an unlikable, cold bitch. No other way around it. She was unfeeling, uncaring, seemed like a one-note character. In this episode, it was a much more believable, fully vetted character, and less bitch, more just a smartass, and I enjoyed it. I liked when she was on screen, and there was definitely a chemistry between her and Shadow.
Yeah, I mean, I like this show, guys. I mean, I've liked the show from episode 1. I think I've been the only one that has liked every episode. So, yeah, this is great.
So, Raj, how did you feel, though, about the CGI opening? Like, that was a departure from what we've seen in previous episodes. It was completely different.
Number one, it was shot in a very similar format that the last episode was, Lower Moon, where it was shot in a cinematic field of vision, right? So you had the bars on. And I think that gave it a unique feeling because the rest of the episode is shot in a traditional, full television manner. But the fact that they used animation to kind of tell a backstory, I thought for the first time, it worked because there weren't live actors with CGI, so they could take more liberties with it. And I know that you're a big fan of movies like A Nightmare Before Christmas and those Tim Burton styles. So I was like, right away, I figured, hey, Gene's really going to like this because it's almost in that same kind of style.
Yeah, I was waiting on the opening for the real live actors to start interacting with this, and I've been really, ticked about that. So one of the show facts that Big D pointed out was that this is the first episode not written by the showrunners Bryan Fuller and Michael Green. It had David Graziano as he had the task of bringing all these separate threads together into one cohesive episode. And he's got a background in animation, which was seen in the Starz like after show vignette. I thought it really showed in this, and as you mentioned, it had sort of a stop motion feel to it. Big D, were you sold on this CGI?
I loved it. I felt like they should have done this episode 1. It lays out the entire foundation of what the show is. And I'd mentioned how I was lost for a lot of the first 2 episodes. In a clear, concise, 2-minute piece of animation that I thought was stylized beautifully. They could have done this for every Coming to America vignette, and it would have been consistent. It would have been cohesive. And I love the fact they tell you, they lay it out. If a god loses the faith of the people, it will be forgotten. In a way that's simple, understand. I loved it.
I think one of the things that really stood out to me was, as you mentioned, if this would have been the opening of the entire show, then when the buffalo appears or when you see the bone orchard, all of it becomes, I think we're seeing pieces of those. And so it could work both ways. You could see those things early in the show and then see them in this vignette and go, oh, okay, I recognize that. But I think it would have been even more amazing if you did it the other way around. Like, is that bone orchard the orchard in which this tribe is standing? The buffalo, is that the buffalo to which, sacrifice is made, that representation. So in that sense, I thought that they did a really good job. But yeah, this could have really been an opening and given us all a platform to stand on.
Yeah, so if you've never listened to American Gods by Shout on TV, here's the format of how we go about this in our deep dive. We talk in big topics of the episode. We dive into major plot points. We don't go by a scene-by-scene regurgitation. We assume that you've already watched it. If you haven't, press pause and go watch it, then come back. You'll get much more enjoyment out of the podcast that way. We also encourage you, if there's things that we've missed, things that we get wrong, or things you don't agree with, please write into us. We do a episode every Thursday that we release. We take the top emails of the week from our audience and respond to them. You can write into us at hosts@shoutontv.com. Even if your email isn't the top email of the week or we don't read it on that episode, you can visit our website, shoutontv.com, where we release all the emails in their raw and unedited versions. And there's a comment section on every one of those to where you can join the conversation. So again, please visit our website, shoutontv.com, subscribe to us wherever you found us, and please leave a 5-star review on iTunes. So here are the topics that we're going to dive into today. We are going to touch more on that CGI opening sequence, dive into the meaning behind the Old Gods, that Coming to America vignette. We'll also talk about Shadow's reaction to Laura and how it may have been a little bit more believable than Audrey's in episode 4. We'll dive into the new gods, media technology, and Mr. World. We'll also talk about Shadow Wednesday's arrest, how it's not necessarily canon. It's not necessarily part of the original storyline, but it is quite significant to the television series and what we've seen so far. We'll also talk about some of the Easter eggs hints and some of the things that you may have missed, or some of the allusions. So those are our topics that we're going to discuss today. That being said, let's dive back into that CGI, that Coming to America vignette. And one thing that I really like about the opening sequence is they've gone away with the Somewhere in America opening pinship, or the Somewhere in America plastered up on a wall. And I think that when a show finally gives credit to its audience, it finally says, hey, you're intelligent enough to understand what we're doing here, I think it takes a step in the right direction.
I completely agree. I think it's clear that they did this Coming to America vignette in this style because the cost would have been astronomical to try to film this piece with actually live actors trying to cross the land bridge and build the world 13,000 years ago. I think it would have been astronomically crazy, but it was perfect. They lay it out. They tell us what the entire show is about. Mr. Anubis narrates over the ending of the sequence and says, "The gods are great, but people are greater. For it is in their hands that the gods are born, and in their hearts that they return. Gods live and die, and soon enough they can be forgotten." And they're speaking about Nunanin. How do you pronounce that?
It's like Nunani. I couldn't quite nail it, but yeah, I think that this wasn't the clearest, most direct of the vignettes, but it was very effective in the sense that it illustrated exactly how a god lives and dies. In addition, it made one really key point, and they talked about in it the fact that back in the day, like the farther back you go, that wall between us and the gods was thinner, right? That you had a more direct connection with them. And so, Big D, to answer your question, is when we talked earlier about how do the old gods stand any chance against the new gods, part of that is the fact that when we think about the new gods, we're not willingly or knowingly worshiping them, right? Like in the sense that I don't have an altar necessarily to technology or an altar necessarily to media. Yeah, I've got a TV screen and I'm watching that and I believe in it in that sense. And so there is a belief there, but it's not that one-on-one conversation with that God where you actually are, receiving feedback and visions and that sort of thing.
But I still think if we're going on sheer numbers, because it appears that a faithful, devout believer is what empowers the gods. So whether it's not measuring the strength of their devotions, or someone who doesn't believe in a deity and a god, who sits in front of their computer screen 18 hours a day, is their faith any less powerful to the gods than the old gods?
Well, I think it's more that relationship with them, right? That you're not necessarily you're not necessarily acknowledging the God and believing in it. There are rules, right, that are set up essentially. You're not asking for any sort of a miracle or anything like that, which would mean more of a leap of faith, more of a belief, right? And we start to see that in this episode too with Shadow, where they're warning, media is warning Technical Boy, and Mr. World is upset about that don't give Shadow Moon any reason to believe in Mr. Wednesday. The more you make him believe in Mr. Wednesday, the more powerful Mr. Wednesday becomes.
So I think that this story that they chose to tell also played a significance in the plot of the episode. They went back all the way to, human beings crossing the Siberian-Alaskan land bridge. The travelers appear in North America. There's already a god present, represented by the buffalo. The buffalo and his people try to make peace. The peace is squashed in all-out war, eventually ends in Nunanindans being forgotten and wiped off America. Is this supposed to represent the first clash of the gods? Because later in the episode, we get our first battle lines being drawn, where Mr. World, media, Technical Boy come into the prison and try to recruit. Did they show us this to say this was the first time that gods have gone head-to-head?
I mean, that to me seems likely. I don't know, again, if it's the first time it's happened, but it's an earlier depiction of a shift between gods and how exactly that works. That, gods die out and then they're forgotten and new ones take their place based on their efficacy or their power in a particular people. So yeah, I think that's a really good piece of homework there, Big D.
So what we saw, though, was when the high priestess, the leader of her people, went to her god, the Nunini. I don't know if that's how you pronounce it, but she asks, hey, how do I feed my people? How am I going to keep my people alive? And the god shows her, you have to sacrifice yourself to the new god, the buffalo god, the new god of the land. She does that. The chieftain of the buffalo people come and they're like, hey, your high priestess gave herself. We now make a peace offering. The mammoth people reject their peace offering. Why would they reject their peace offering if the high priestess made that self-sacrifice?
I don't think it was the fact that she sacrificed herself. I took it as that you will not be fed. This will not be easy, that it will be difficult, and that she was trying to stand up for her faith. And that's what caused her to be killed. Then there was a peace offering made, and at that point, to her people and the believers, I don't think any god would ever really want peace. It just dilutes their power. I think every god would be fighting and scuffling for as many followers as they could have.
Yeah, I had like a total third take on it, so I think we might need some help from the listenership on this one. But for me, I thought what the fact was that she had basically offered herself up as a sacrifice. She saw in the vision that the buffalo would ram her. That was the vision that was given to her by her god. So she knew what she had to do, and then in doing so, they offered her to the native tribe of the land. And then that was rejected. The arrows came from the blue side of that battle. So basically, if you watch the hand of the guy who's making the offering, he makes the offer, it's rejected, and then he waves his hand, and then the arrows fly. So basically, he's the one making the offering. When his offering is rejected, that's when they kill.
Right, that's what I said. So the priestess of the mammoth tribe offered herself up as sacrifice.
Yes.
As a result, the new tribe, right, we'll call it the buffalo tribe, offered the mammoth tribe, the rest of the people, hey, here's some food for your people, come join us. They said no, fuck it, and then the buffalo tribe killed all the warriors of the mammoth tribe and then tempted their kids. So basically now the kids of the mammoth tribe are being raised by this new tribe and then adopt their culture and their gods.
100%, Raj.
Aha. It's the first time I've ever gotten anything right on this show.
Bullshit. Shut up.
You could compare that to modern day religion, the way that certain cultures have enveloped. So correct me if I'm wrong, guys, but the idea of Christianity has really come as a result of evolution. Not necessarily, hey, we wrote something down in a Bible by Jesus and the apostles, and that's all that it ever was. That's all that, no, Christianity has adopted many of the same ideas that resulted from paganism. And that was solely for the purpose of spreading that religion around. So as religion spreads, right, it adopts as a means of peace offering, right? So like take an example of a pagan celebration, Christmas, winter harvest, same deal, spring harvest, Easter. All of those are pagan holidays. The things that we enjoy about those holidays were co-opted by Christianity as a way to spread the religion, the word of the gospel, the word of Jesus Christ in those areas that didn't believe in Jesus. But they were like, hey, let's do a little peace treaty here. You get to keep your spring harvest festival with your food and your beer and your mead, as long as you now accept Jesus as, the one true God. And they're like, yeah, fuck it, whatever. We enjoy our spring and fall harvests.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And if you look at Islam spreading through the Middle East, particularly with my cultural background, with Iranians, with Persians, people widely think of ancient Persia, as being Muslim. No way. Islam is a relatively new religion. Prior to that, the dominant force there was Zoroastrianism, right? And so that's why it was a fairly liberal area of the world for a very long time. And most of our traditions, like when we have a Nowruz or other celebrations, people are like, oh, is that it's a Muslim thing? No, it's not. It's a Persian thing that predates. But when, Islam came through, it's not like they got rid of those holidays. They're like, okay, cool. Like, that's whatever you want to do.
So the next topic we want to talk about is Shadow's reaction to Laura. Gene and Big D, you guys had huge problems with the way that Audrey reacted to Laura last episode with the bathroom scene. This episode is all about the reaction that Shadow has when he comes back into the hotel room and he sees Laura there. Is this, in your opinion, more believable than the other one? And did you like it seems like you guys like this scene better.
Yes, we went from Audrey's "get out of my house, you zombie whore," to Shadow walking in, taking a moment, and essentially, he says, hey, and then under his breath, the fuck are you doing here? And that's exactly, if my dead wife, who is cheating on me, showed up in my motel room after I just been through a world of shit, that would be, the fuck are you doing here, is right. And then you see him, instead of that slapstick, shit that was going on with Audrey and Laura, you can look at Ricky Whittle's face. He is visibly trying to contain both rage and sadness at the same time at seeing his wife. I thought that was a wonderful performance by him, much stronger actually than Emily Browning's performance. Really, really liked this scene a lot.
Well, I enjoyed Laura this time much more. It's clear that I thought she was a bitch last episode. Here, it's just she's sarcastic. She's honest. She owns up to it with Shadow, and I think that was a big part of my accepting her. I saw that as genuine. This is who she is. She wasn't just putting on a front. And I loved that Shadow did not forgive her. I was like, please don't forgive her. Please don't forgive her. And when he shoots her down, it was a big one to me. I liked it. But there's a huge contrast between Emily Browning and Ricky Whittle's performance. Browning is nonchalant and flippant. Now, that's either her, or I have to believe that Laura thinks the only way she's going to possibly get Shadow back is by acting as if it all doesn't matter. And at the same time, you have Ricky, Shadow, he is protruding, like you said, that intense anger, that just fear. He's just raging. And I think it's great. I don't know if Laura still, if it's love or if it's maybe a chance at redemption, but she was a much more humanized character that I like and I want to learn more about.
Yeah, there were some touches there I thought were really great. There was the bath scene when she needs the bath to warm her skin for him. Like that, there was a sadness to that. It's a sacrifice on her part. If you're a dead body, the last thing you want to do is get in hot water, right? And then what I really loved is there's that common theme in literature about the undead or those who live forever not being able to feel or taste anything. The fact that she couldn't experience that cigarette, that was an extension of her previous numbness, and it's a sort of a curse there. But what I liked is we've seen that a million times, but there's that twist that Shadow makes her feel alive. It explains to us why she's... It might not even be love that she's working for, but just a chance to feel something. That's really what's motivating her. That made a lot more sense to me than what I think we were presented with in episode 4, which was sort of like this light beacon thing, and I didn't really work for me. This works a lot better.
So if the performances didn't carry this material, this could have easily transformed into that zombie movie, Warm Bodies. Seeing the heart inside of Laura's chest beat after that kiss could have easily gone trope and cheesy, but because the performances merited it, I believed it, and I was like, oh, I almost want a redemption arc for Laura.
Well, that also, is that the reason that she's going after him is to draw? Is she a succubus? Would she draw the power away from him to give herself life? Is that what the power is?
I think part of it is she mentions to him that in the moments that she's dying, she was like, fuck, I'm dying, and didn't really feel anything about it. She wasn't really afraid of anything like that. I think that that the only lessons that she's learned from dying is that she is left with, she wanted to have some sort of a purpose, right? That you have here a nihilist who believes in nothing, wanting to have something to live for. And that thing that she's living for is him. And so it's just graphically depicted in The Heartbeat.
I was highly worried during that bathroom scene. First of all, I think it was very cool that we actually got to see some zombie boobs. Have we ever seen zombie boobs before?
I mean, I've seen lots of zombie boobs in zombie movies, but
okay.
these sutures were really off-putting. Like, I like the fact that they didn't try to hypersexualize her. Like, she's still got some massive wounds there. You see Shadow kind of back up and away from her when she gets out of the tub, which is kind of that, it's that question. Like, if your lover came back from the dead but was gross, like, how much do you actually love that person?
When Matt Sweeney comes in, he's like, "Hey, baby, you gotta quit taking those hot baths because your skin is gonna, peel off." That's exactly what I was thinking as well. Is because, hey, you just got that nice makeover by Anubis and Ibis, and you're gonna take all that shit away by going and taking a hot bath, and then if I'm Shadow, am I gonna let my dead zombie wife who was just cheating on me and blowing some other dude before she died, kiss me on the lips? No, not at all.
And one of the things the show did is obviously you can't smell what's going on there. So they use Mr. Wednesday as a way to show, too, that it smells like a dead body. As he said, cat piss and floor cleaner or something like that.
Oh, does it smell like that? Oh, I completely missed that. That's another thing.
She wants to have this moment and this one chance that she might have with Shadow, and trying to kiss Shadow, smelling, like we said, like a rotting corpse, and being cold to the touch, that's a double whammy. So she's willing to sacrifice maybe a couple weeks of deterioration in order to feel physically warm.
Yeah, dude, but I take like icy over smelly. Like you can chill. Things that are cold don't tend to smell that bad. Just saying.
Yeah,
the bath should tackle both. You're killing some of the smell, and she'll be warm. But it's a small window of time.
Here's a little tip from your old buddy Raj. So if you ever find yourself coming back from the dead and you've got sutures all over you, and you are the undead, you are living, you are a zombie, and you want to go around walking and haunting people or visiting old lovers of the past, please be sure that you use the air conditioner and you only visit cold weather states, because we all know the cold weather helps preserve the body longer. In fact, that is why in a zombie apocalypse, those living in hot weather states would probably do better, because the zombies would rot faster, therefore making them easier to kill, as we learned in Max Brooks's A Guide to the Zombie Apocalypse.
In addition to that, tip from your buddy Gene, crop tops. Crop tops are your friend.
What are the opening scene, or in that opening scene that we do see Laura in the hotel room, we see a close-up of the fly. And there was a theory floated by one of our great listeners, Jez Bell, and I think we've linked to it, the idea that there's another god, a Norse god that is spying on Laura and Shadow. Jez called it first the Floki theme, because the Norse god Loki has been known to appear as a shapeshifter in the form of a fly in different types of Norse mythology. Is that something that we are agreeable to? Is this something that you believe in now?
Two problems I have with that. One, if Bro is a shapeshifter, he wouldn't be spending time in the penitentiary, right? Like, we've seen him locked up already. So how's he flying out of there as a fly? It doesn't make any sense. Two, you've got the fly immediately goes and gets stuck on the fly paper. So if this is a god, he's kind of fucked. Like, he just got stuck, and there's multiple other flies stuck there. So to me, this one doesn't hold weight. I think it was just a stylistic thing that was done by the show. They like focusing in on things like slow motion cigarette packs falling inside of vending machines.
We also see a close-up of the room number 55. Does that have any significance to the story?
Yeah, so number 55, I looked into it. It's the largest Fibonacci number that's also triangular number, meaning if you add it up in a triangle, it would add up to 55. It's also largely considered the pop culture speed limit. Again, I'm pulling these from all over the place. These are just possibilities. So, we've got this highway and motel motif throughout the show, crossing America. So 55 could be seen as like the governance there. I also looked into angel numbers, and angel numbers are basically messages from your angels or from a higher cadre that's basically trying to tell you what to do. And so the number 55 is significant of the time to let go of the old that is no longer positively serving you and get ready for big changes that are going to take place in your life, releasing old doubts, fears, and perceived obstacles, and looking forward to wonderful new opportunities. So whether that's relevant or not, I don't know, but it seemed like they really focused on that number. There was a reason for it being there.
Now, I know we touch a lot on the fact that Laura's interaction with Shadow was better. But did you also, I mean, there was some Twitter responses from fans that tweeted at us that said that they did like the humor with Mad Sweeney. And then there were those who said, and there was a lot of them, that said that they didn't care for it. What were your thoughts on the Mad Sweeney-Laura interaction?
Yeah, I wasn't a big fan of that. I get what they're showing. Again, there was an article written about American Gods a few weeks ago, or I guess a week ago, and they pointed out that Laura Moon, they called her like a pint-sized killer or something like that. And I think this is just this fascination with she's so small, how could she be so strong? And they like that juxtaposition of his size versus hers. And so when she flicks him and he flies in the wall, goofy. When she stands on his hand, goofy, all that. What I did like, when he actually starts drowning her, and the cops show up and she plays dead, I thought that was a pretty clever move. And what he says, he goes, dead wife. He's calling her dead wife. Get my fucking coin, dead wife. And I just love that he's like given her, in this short interaction, already given her the nickname of dead wife.
The humor is used to advance the plot. Last week we had fart jokes and Thelma and Louise road trip that didn't advance. Here, the exposition was great. They're letting us know that Laura can keep the coin until it falls apart. We know that Laura will eventually deteriorate. We know what the limits of Mad Sweeney's ability to get the coin back are. We now see some of also the abilities that Laura has and her powers, and she's growing into it and being more confident. I'll take it. That smile at the end was fantastic, though. That little smirk was great. And then at the end, kicking off the door in the morgue, great use of comedy. As long as it advances the plot, I'm completely fine with it.
Well, you talk about advancing the plot. The next topic that I want to advance the podcast with is the New Gods, which we've seen before. Technical Boy and Gillian Anderson make a reappearance in this episode. What did you guys think of their scenes, and did that give you more information on these characters?
Gillian Anderson, I think, was trying to pull off sexy, but she just looked rough as Marilyn Monroe. I was not buying into that at all. But her Bowie, the accent was a little off, but man, she was, I don't know if people caught that she was speaking in David Bowie song lyrics. And so that was really, really cool to me that they went that degree, and even went down to the detail of getting the eyes right. So David Bowie has different colored eyes with different sized pupils. And so they nailed that. As well. I like that they did this, though. She also makes a reference to War of the Worlds, and I thought that was a really good touch on showing just how far back her power goes and how successful it could be. Where in War of the Worlds, of course, when they did the H.G. Wells radio production, people heard it on the radio and thought there was actually people coming from the sky to kill us, which she then loops back to Starman from David Bowie. So it was really, really clever writing. I enjoyed that. But the key thing, as you mentioned, Raj, is that we now get a pecking order where we know that that Technical Boy is not as powerful as Media, who's been there longer, who is not as powerful as Mr. World.
The other thing that I read in one article, and I want to give credit where credit's due, but I just can't remember where I read it, but they were talking about how Ziggy Stardust was introduced in a time where homophobia was rampant. And the idea of a man impersonating a woman was very behind closed doors, was underground. And the character of Ziggy Stardust kind of brought a new paranoia to the world. And it took a long time for us as a culture to get over that and accept it. Is that why they chose that character?
Yeah, he definitely. Ziggy Stardust caused a panic in the gender identity between male and female. But I question why choose that character when presenting yourself to Technical Boy. Marilyn Monroe makes sense to Wednesday. It's an older character, iconic character. To choose Ziggy Stardust for someone who is a modern technology, wouldn't it have made sense to pick Skrillex or somebody like that?
I think two things there. One is that she's showing her power in the sense that she can appear as whatever the hell she wants. But also the fact that, I think David Bowie and Ziggy Stardust are largely relevant in today's world. When Bowie died, there was a huge outpouring among, I went to the bar that night, and I think half the people that were younger than me, I was kind of shocked. In addition to all that, though, I think it was about the messaging, right? That she's appearing with the sort of messaging that she wants to say. And like I said, she spoke in Bowie lyrics. So those just happen to be the lyrics that were most pertinent to the situation. That everything that she does is derivative, right? She doesn't have her own identity. Her identity is everything that's previously existent and recycled. But it's a good point, Big D. She could have gone with Skrillex or Diplo.
In that same article, they reference why she chose to appear as Marilyn Monroe, and this is one theory that I do actually really like, is the fact that Marilyn Monroe was very good at tempting men. She was very good at persuading men, using sex as a means of selling an idea. And that is the reason that she appeared to Mr. Wednesday in that form. And I kind of like that idea because it's a whole sales pitch that Mr. World and media are delivering.
Oh, yeah, I loved that. There was this, they turned that interrogation room into a stage. I mean, that literally was stagecraft. You had spotlight on Gillian Anderson. You had the entrance of Mr. World. You had the walls turning into screens to show the rocket launch. And I think that they did a really great job. And Crispin Glover comes in and does exactly what he's great at doing as Mr. World. He comes in and he's delivering it in just that weird ass Crispin Glover way, but also you need that weird character because Mr. World is such a hard thing to get your hands around, right? So he says everything is all systems interlaced, a single product manufactured for a single audience. Sounds pretty serious, and then all of a sudden he's talking about salsa. He's talking about it's chunky or spicy or whatever. So in a sense, like this was a really, really powerful scene, and it is one that bears watching a second time because there's a lot going on at the same time. Still, not really sold on the Marilyn Monroe thing. I just think Gillian Anderson, it's not a good look for her.
Well, it may not necessarily be a good look for her. Listen, I liked Gillian Anderson, and I don't mean to be an apologist here for the show and everything that it does, but I did like it because behind it is that meaning of everything that we know about media when it tries to sell us something. Think of advertisements. Think of traditional advertising. What does it do? It wants if it's trying to sell you something, it tries to make you look cool, powerful, or a sexy woman. Sex sells, right? So a sexy woman like a Marilyn Monroe, traditionally in most men's mind, was that iconic beauty. That it's what traditional beauty, goes for. And I also did did they also make the allusion to like the CIA operative in the JFK assassination? That was interesting. I've never heard that before.
With the syringe in the eye?
The syringe in the eye. I've never heard this. Is that an actual
that's an old
conspiracy theory? Is it really?
Yeah, they all think that she died, that she was killed.
Which is also really cool when you think about media today and the way that it's used to propagate ideas and conspiracy theories. And you look at what happened in the last election, all of that and all this disinformation that was spread through media, right? How it controls people. So again, if you look at just a layer deeper than saying, "Oh, that's Gillian Anderson playing Marilyn Monroe," and I don't like that. Look to what the words are being said, similar to like what you said about the Ziggy Stardust. Those are actual lyrics from David Bowie that's delivering a message, and again, I think that goes to the brilliance of this show.
I just think you could have shot it with a different lens, not gotten so close to her face, maybe given her a better fitting dress. There were just problems there. When her skirt started to flap, I was like, no, stop it.
I felt that way when she's like, "Oh, I warmed my body for you, Shadow." When Laura's like, come over here and give me a smooch. No, thank you, zombie wife. But, you talk about the character of Mr. World, and Crispin Glover, I think, nails it. Crispin Glover is one of the more interesting character actors of our age, not only because he actually, I think, is a living vampire, because he has not aged 35 years. When he's giving that monologue almost in a vein of like a Bond villain to Mr. Wednesday and Shadow, what does he represent? What is this god?
All right, so Mr. World, again, it's hard to get your hands around. It's hard to tell if he's good or bad, new or old, but basically what he is that connected world. He's the living incarnation of capitalism and globalization. So he's the overlord of media and internet. So that's why he kind of stands over these two characters. And therefore, he just he has a singular vision of the world. It's kind of just an all-encompassing being, right? A one power, which is exactly the antithesis of multiple gods, right? He's a unifying god. And so again, it speaks to the fact that, in these plans that he has, like killing off, 24.9, million North Koreans that don't fit into his singular vision of the world, it totally makes sense. But I would argue as he leaves that room, he could just kill, as Technical Boy, he could just kill everybody in the room right there, but he doesn't. And so you have to remember that Mr. Wednesday is not to be trusted. I think we've established that. Matt Sweeney is warning against him. We know that he's a shyster, and we've got all that going. He warns against Mr. World. That's really the only evidence that we have that Mr. World would do anything negative to Shadow. Otherwise, this could be looked at as a rescue attempt, right? They just killed all the cops to clear the paths for Shadow to get out. So I just think that I think we've been given a nugget there by the show that maybe Mr. World isn't necessarily the bad guy.
Well, I think Mr. World's reverence for the experience and the longevity of Wednesday goes a long way to explain to me as a show-only watcher the importance of Wednesday. It seemed genuine that Mr. World was trying to teach Technical Boy, hey, shut your mouth. He's been around longer. Makes me really believe Wednesday has information that the new gods need to fight a battle against the old. That even though they may be more powerful, they are the gods of the day, they may underestimate and not know the true capability of the old gods.
Well, what did you think of Mr. World's offer to Mr. Wednesday? I thought it was kind of a brilliant offer, and if I'm an old god, why wouldn't I take that?
How the fuck do you pass that up? You've got your name on a rocket, and you're a god of death, essentially, like a god of war. And how does he pass on that? And the only answer he has is that, like, I want to be the sand in the oyster. You know, it was so strange to me. But again, it's. You know that Mr. Wednesday has a deeper plan, too. So we've now seen a show of force. By Technical Boy, he can get his goons to hang you. You see Media, she can knock your teeth out with a kiss. You've seen Mr. World, who can just storm into a room and massacre an entire building of people on a whim. And so we're wondering, what the hell can Mr. Wednesday do?
Well, I loved Mr. Wednesday's retort. I wrote this down. He says, the new gods, all you guys do is occupy people's time. We actually gave back. We gave meaning. So when you think about it, right, if you tie it back to the opening vignette, and this is why I think this episode is so powerful, is the fact that during the time of Mr. Wednesday, listen, I think it's solidified here that it's Odin. So I'm going to call Mr. Wednesday Odin Mr. Wednesday, because I think we can pretty much say that for certainty now, right?
Yeah, Matt Sweeney says that dude you call Grimnir, that dude you guys call Mr. Wednesday. So essentially he's saying right there that is solid confirmation Mr. Wednesday is Odin. He's Grimnir. Okay. It's the same name.
If you tie back to that original vignette and even go back to episode 1, the opening vignette there, where there was a direct correlation, if you did something, if you sacrificed yourself, if you talked directly to your gods, they would give you answers. They would give you when to sail back to your land, right? If I'm Mr. Wednesday, of course I'm going to reject his offer, because I don't want to just be another cog in your wheel. I don't want to have to bow down to Mr. World in this interconnected. I don't want to be your lackey. I want to be that sand in the oyster, right? I want to be that little annoyance there. So I don't know. I just love this story. I love this idea. Even being a book reader and enjoying the show, because they're kind of taking liberties here with the story. Now, the one thing that I didn't like, though, when we talk about the CGI, was that face really necessary for Mr. World? Was that completely pertinent to the narrative, or could we have lost it altogether?
Yeah, we sort of went Lawnmower Man on that. I don't know what the hell that was all about. I thought it was a good depiction of what he is. I think they're trying to give a visual depiction of what he is. Kind of like on Hackers when they're hacking. Like, they don't need to show us the code, but they're like, look, this is what hacking looks like. So in essence here, one of the things, though, to get to on that was he's trying to persuade Shadow to kind of be on his side there. I don't understand why. If I was trying to persuade a guy to be on my side, I wouldn't mention what it looks like when he masturbates, or how many sexual partners his mom had. Which 86, by the way.
Wow,
you go, girl.
86 pants.
No, I like that. So I think the whole purpose of that line, though, was to show Mr. World is all encompassing. He's all knowing. He's all interconnected. And if there's anything that's fucking scary, it's the idea of when you talk about the capitalism, globalism, is this overarching big brother state that's going to be watching and listening to every single thing that you do and know everything that you do, your good and your bad. The only question, though, isn't that kind of the whole purpose of gods? Isn't that, I mean, the way that we're religious? I mean, fuck, Mr. Wednesday has his own crows that are spying on people. So, I mean, what's the difference there?
Yeah, I mean, there really isn't. I mean, it's essentially, I think the only difference is Mr. Wednesday only cares to be a god to the people who wish to worship him. Mr. World wants to be a god to everyone. But what's interesting there is Mr. Wednesday does not establish himself as a leader. I mean, he's called in the show's description, and people widely call him the leader of the old gods. So far, we haven't seen any old gods following him, right? Mr. World, on the other hand, there's a very distinct pecking order there. He is more powerful, but allows these other gods to coexist and to subsist as long as they serve him, ultimately.
Well, the next topic that we want to dive into is Shadow Wednesday's arrest. It is not necessarily canon in the book, but it is significant. Gene, you wrote down this note as this topic. What did you want to talk about here?
So basically, I had a negative reaction immediately to this scene because when they pulled up to arrest Shadow, I'm like, what, this is normal cops? What, they're interrogating them? Like, what the hell is going on here? And that didn't really sit right with me because it didn't make sense. But then I saw where they're going with it. And this is one of those times when the show changes the storyline a little bit, but it kind of makes sense. This interrogation gave an interesting way to narrate what's happened so far. As they go through, as Shadow and Mr. Wednesday are talking to the cops, Mr. Wednesday especially, he's like, well, you want the truth? Here's the truth, because nobody's going to believe him, right? And he goes through and he narrates everything that's happened to this point. So you get a very clear understanding of who Chernobog is, what they were doing in Chicago and how everything played out. I thought it was really, really smartly done. In addition, we see this evidence drop that the police got, and you think, oh, it must be Technical Boy. But then you realize that this wouldn't be Technical Boy because it's a little too subtle for him. Who could it be? And then the question's answered for you. It's Mr. World.
Yeah, Gene, I actually agree 100% of you, and I love the fact that they're dropping those hints with the type of evidence there. The other little things that are not that subtle, but I thought was pretty neat is the way that the spider's unlocking Mr. Wednesday's handcuffs, and obviously that's the spider god, right? That's Mr. Nancy that we saw in episode 3, or I'm sorry, it was episode 2, right? On the slave ship. Okay, so I guess we already assumed that Mr. Wednesday has recruited Mr. Nancy, and Mr. Nancy's on his side. So we should hopefully see more of that. But then as they're escaping and as they're running out, there's this tree that's enveloped the police station. Is that the tree that's killed all the police officers? Is that what we're supposed to believe?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that the New God trio kind of killed them because you see them with like phones wrapped around their necks, stuff like that going on. The tree seems to again have an organic root, no pun intended. It's coming from the world itself. It doesn't seem like a high tech solution to a violent problem. And you notice that Mr. Wednesday is very nervous when everything is going on outside, when the commotion is going outside. So you get the entrance of the New Gods. There's where the carnage happens, and then the tree kind of starts happening later. At least that's what I observed.
Another show on Starz is Ash versus Evil Dead, and this, I think some people said that this is just another rehash of Ash versus Evil Dead with the eye popping out of the tree. But I did a little bit of research, and obviously, like you said, not to make a pun here, but this is actually rooted in Norse mythology, and we've seen this throughout the series already. Is the idea of Yggdrasil is Yggdrasil, right? It's the world tree, but it's also called Odin's horse or the gallows.
Right, and we see this throughout the show. This is going to be a recurring theme that appears several times in the show. We've already seen it, earlier, and now it's back again. And earlier, if you remember, it also attacked Shadow in his dream. It scratched his face. So you're seeing here that there's a recurring malevolence between this tree and Shadow.
This could possibly be foreshadowing. Foreshadowing.
And if you're asking, we asked before, speaking of that tree, what happened to all the bodies of, Technical Boy's goons? And I think we get an answer here that kind of cleans that up nicely. Is they ask, what story are they going to tell here? Anyone they want. Especially like this is after the police are slaughtered there. This explains why nobody's looked into all these bodies being left around. Because if you have control over technology, you have control over media, you can control the spin on what happened there. What better way to cover up a story than to have control over the means of publishing an answer to that story?
Yeah, absolutely. Is there anything else? I know, Gene, you had written down some Easter eggs and some allusions to the show. Do you want to kind of dive into those?
Yeah, we already talked about the number 55. We talked about Grimnir, which is, again, another new name for Mr. Wednesday. Another thing to point out, if you didn't catch it, which it was pretty obvious on this show, was that the Ravens are hanging out at the motel. And we actually get to see, I thought it was going to be a much more, trippy way, as American Gods like to do, of how the Ravens communicate with Mr. Wednesday. Nope, they go knock on his door and just talk to him. So that was pretty cool to see. But basically, we now, if there's any doubt there, these Ravens are working for Mr. Wednesday. One of the things that Mr. Wednesday did during his interrogation, though, is he quotes a line of poetry, and it's from Joe Orton, the playwright Joe Orton, and it's called "The Ruffian on the Stair." He tells the cop, he says, "Madam Life's a piece in bloom. Death goes dogging everywhere. She's the tenant of the room. He's the ruffian on the stair." And so this guy's trying to dig for his identity, and he's telling him right there, he's the ruffian on the stair. And to think of that in terms of Odin, or Mr. Wednesday, who he is the gallows god. He is death. But he's presenting himself as a ruffian, as the one who doesn't have the throne. He's on the staircase, like he's dogging everywhere, right? And so it's basically speaking that beware of the one in the low station, he's the one that you got to watch out for. He represents death, whereas life, presented as being the tenant, the one in charge, isn't necessarily the one you have to watch out for, isn't necessarily the threatening one. So I thought that was a really cool way of slipping that in there as he's muttering it about. Again, I thought Ian McShane did a great job on that interrogation scene, just, how he just easily shifted in that role of like the confused old man who might be senile.
Not only that, but then went into, hey, this isn't working for you. I'm going to go ahead and just lay all my cards on the table. Loved Ian McShane in this episode. So that's all of our topics. If there's nothing else we want to talk about before we get into the shout-outs, again, if there's anything that you liked or agreed with us on or disagreed or things that we may have missed, please write in for the American Gods Confessional. Our email address is hosts@shadontv.com, and you can see all of our listener emails in their full unedited raw versions on our website, shadontv.com. While you're on that website, you can you can sign up for a shout out. Gene, what exactly is a shout out?
Raj, a shout out is a way to show your support for Shout on TV and the American Gods podcast. What we do is you go onto the website, shoutontv.com, scroll down, and a little slide out will come out asking if you want to get a shout out. Put your name in there, and we will read your name on the podcast right here. So this week's shout outs go to Chris Bracey, Harlan, Elisa, and our buddies at The Dominant Paradigm. The Dominant Paradigm is another American Gods podcast. You can find them online at geeksofdoom.com or on Twitter at Gods Podcast. Not to be confused with Gods Podcast, which is a highly religious Twitter handle that doesn't get used very often. But in any event, thank you so much for your shout outs. Again, if you don't want to take the time to write a letter or an email at hosts@shoutontv.com, go ahead and get a shout out. We really appreciate the support. It lets us know that you're listening, and that feels good.
We don't want to be forgotten. That's the worst thing that can happen in the podcast world. We don't want to be forgotten, and that we draw our power from shout outs. So please keep writing in. Unless there's nothing else, that concludes this week's episode of Shout on TV American Gods Deep Dive Edition. Be sure to follow us on social media and share with a friend. We're everywhere, including Twitter, Snapchat, and Instagram at Shout on TV. Our Facebook, to just search for Shout on TV Podcast. Our website, once again, is shoutontv.com. That email, hosts@shoutontv.com. We're everywhere fine podcasts can be found, including iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, YouTube. Be sure to subscribe, and if you stop by any of those, be sure to leave a 5-star review. That really helps the podcast grow. You can also check out our sister podcast, Shat the Movies, where we review 80s and 90s movies from our childhood and see if they still hold up. You actually, the audience, vote for the movies that we review. You can find all the information there at shatthemovies.com. On behalf of my two co-hosts, Big D Dick Ebert and Gene Lyons, I'm Roger Roper. Be sure to join us Thursday for the American Gods Confessional, where we respond to your thoughts on the show. Thank you so much for listening. We really appreciate it. Take care, good night, and hail the old gods.